Good afternoon and welcome to True Crime Mysteries. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome, and if you're returning, welcome back. If you can give this video a like and comment with your thoughts down below, that would be much appreciated as it helps the channel to grow. And if you are not subscribed yet, go ahead and click that red button because I make more content like this, and hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post. Today we're discussing 3 criminal doctors who forgot they pledged to do no harm. Let's get into it. Number 1. John Bodkin Adams. In the 1950s, people were calling it the murder trial of the century. A general practitioner in Eastbourne, England, had been accused of targeting his elderly female patients, worming his way into their wills, and killing them with a lethal dose of morphine and heroin. Others said he was conducting mercy killings when assisted suicides weren't an option yet, and only painkillers existed. So what was the truth? On January 21, 1899, Adams was born in Randalston, Ireland, to a religious Protestant family. In 1906, he married Ellen Bodkin, and they went on to have their 2 children, one of whom died during the 1918 influenza pandemic. Adams graduated from the Queen's University in Belfast in 1921. That same year, a surgeon hired him as an assistant houseman at the Bristol Royal Infirmary, where he worked for a year before moving to Eastbourne, England, to work as a general practitioner. There, he would buy a rooming house with money he borrowed from one of his patients, William Mawhood. William's wife described Adams as a real scrounger, as he would often invite himself and his family over for dinner, charge his shopping to their accounts, and, after William's death, visit the widow only once to take a 22-karat gold pen that belonged to William. As the years went on, more suspicious circumstances arose. In 1935, he received an inheritance of £7,385 from his client Matilda Whitton, which was more than half of her entire estate. The inheritance was contested by Matilda's family, but upheld in court. After that, Adams started receiving anonymous letters accusing him of bumping off his clients. A few years later, his patient Agnes Pike was experiencing deteriorating health. She could not recall her own name or where she was. Bodkin had been administering a cocktail of drugs into her system, including morphine, for quite some time. Her family, worried, brought in another doctor who told him there was no medical reason for the injections, so her family halted them. In just a few weeks, she made almost a full recovery. In 1941, Adams earned his diploma in anesthetics and began working at a local hospital. His colleagues didn't remember him fondly. They say he fell asleep during operations, was constantly counting money, and mixed up gas tubes on patients. In 1948, a woman named Edith Morrell suffered a stroke and became partially paralyzed. She then became a patient of Adams, who prescribed her a mixture of heroin and morphine for her discomfort and symptoms. During her time as a patient, she made several different wills. In some, Adams was to receive money in furniture. In others, he wasn't mentioned at all. 3 months before her death, she added a clause that Adams wasn't to receive anything from her estate. But when she died in 1950, Adams still received a sum of money, cutlery, and her Rolls Royce. 7 years later, Adams' patient, 50-year-old Gertrude Hullett, died. She had fallen ill, depressed from her father's death a few months prior, and then fell into a coma after a suspected overdose. Even though she wasn't dead, Adams brought in a local pathologist, Francis Camps, to conduct an autopsy. When the pathologist realized that Gertrude was still alive, He accused Adams of extreme incompetence. When Gertrude passed away, Adams recorded the cause of death to be a brain hemorrhage, but an official investigation deemed it to be suicide, and then the pathologist stated that Gertrude had been poisoned by sleeping pills. Either way, Gertrude's will left valuable items to Adams, including another Rolls-Royce. Adams' inheritance was added into Gertrude's will 5 days before she died. Adams started to gain a reputation as an angel of death, or an angel of mercy, depending on who you asked. The rumors that he would target wealthy widows, persuade them to change their wills in his favor, and then inject them with a lethal injection were so rampant that they led to a police investigation. Investigators looked into cases from 1946 to 1956 and found 163 out of 310 death certificates worthy of investigation. 42% of his patients died from cerebral thrombosis or cerebral hemorrhage, though at the time the average was around 15%. 163 of the death certificates also stated the person died in a coma. In November of 1956, Adams was arrested and charged for including false representation on cremation certificates and granted bail. He was then arrested again in December and charged with the murder of Edith Morrell. In March of 1957, his trial began. He was first tried for Edith Morrell's murder and then Gertrude Hullett's death. Adams said that Edith was in pain and wanted to die, and that it wasn't a crime to ease the suffering of a terminally ill person. Most of the testimonies were made by nurses who cared for Edith around the clock. They testified that Adams would inject Edith with excessive painkillers, including morphine and heroin, but then a judge cross-examined one of the nurses, and it was discovered that Edith's doses were meticulously recorded in a notebook, along with the stages of her illness. The notebook was not found during the police investigation, but instead secured by Adams's defense team and revealed inconsistencies in the nurse's testimonies. In April of 1957, the jury found Adams not guilty after just 45 minutes of deliberation. Police still suspected Adams to be guilty, despite the acquittal, and that he not only killed Gertrude and Edith, but also many other patients. Adams resigned from the National Health Service after the trial. That same year, he was convicted for forging medical prescriptions and fined £2,200. He was taken off the medical register in 1957, but was reinstated as a general practitioner in 1961. On July 4, 1983, Adams died in Eastbourne, England, at 84 years old. At the time of his death, he had amassed a fortune of £400,970. It's rumored that Adams was included in at least 132 of his patients' wills. Number 2. Simon Bramhall.
In 2013, he burned his initials into 2 of his patients' liver transplants during surgery at the QE hospital in Birmingham. He's said to have told a nurse who queried the action, "I do this." And although it caused no lasting physical harm, the marking was branded in court as a criminal abuse of power.
In 2013, Simon Bramhall was a respected consultant surgeon specializing in liver transplant surgery at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, England. That is until another surgeon discovered a strange habit of his. In February and August of 2013, Bramhall had conducted liver transplant surgeries on 2 patients known as Patient A and Patient B. For Patient A, it was a life-saving surgery. But a week later, their liver failed and they had to go back under the knife, this time with a different surgeon. During this procedure, the surgeon saw something unusual. Bramhall had branded the patient's liver with his initials, SB. The surgeon photographed the liver and immediately reported it to the medical director. Bramhall had used an argon beam coagulator to brand the 4-centimeter high mark on the liver. An argon beam coagulator is a medical instrument used to cauterize a wound which helps stop it from bleeding or becoming infected. At the end of 2013, a second incident was reported to the University Hospital Birmingham, NHS Foundation Trust, and Bramhall was suspended from practice. The trust then investigated the incidents. During the investigation, Bramhall said he couldn't remember any other times he branded his patients, other than 2 cases they found. At a disciplinary hearing in May of 2014, the trust found Bramhall guilty of gross misconduct. The West Midlands Police then informed the trust that they were launching a criminal investigation following a complaint from one of Bramhall's victims. That same year, Bramhall resigned from his position. In February of 2017, the General Medical Council issued a warning to Bramhall for his misconduct allegation. According to the case examiners, the warning was issued because his actions didn't contribute to the failure of the first liver transplant. The patients were not put at risk or harmed clinically, there was little or no risk of repetition, and they considered the case exclusively concerning matters of public confidence in their profession. Later that month, he was criminally charged with 2 counts of assault causing bodily harm. On December 23, 2017, he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of assault by beating. Though he didn't physically beat his patients, the case was without legal precedent in criminal law, so the charge was chosen as a reflection of his actions. The ruling judge said, "So far as culpability is concerned, this was conduct born of professional arrogance of such magnitude that it strayed into criminal behavior. What you did was an abuse of power and a betrayal of the trust of these patients had invested in you." During the trial, his defense stated that his actions were done in a naive and foolhardy attempt to relieve tension in the operating room. When a nurse present at the operation questioned why he was branding the liver, he allegedly replied, "I do this." Prosecutors stated that one of Bramhall's patients felt violated and suffered PTSD-like symptoms after the incident was brought to light. One of his patients shared an impact statement that said, "The horror of seeing the photo of my cut-open body with the initials SB on the liver will forever live in my mind. I personally hate the thought of tattoos anyway, and the thought of someone doing this to me while I was unconscious is abhorrent." In January 2018, Bramhall was sentenced to a 12-month community order and fined £10,000. In December of 2020, the Medical Practitioners Tribunal suspended Bramhall's medical resignation for 5 months, stating that his fitness to practice had been impaired. The decision was then appealed by the General Medical Council, as they believed the suspension wasn't enough to protect and maintain the public confidence in the profession. High Court Judge Mrs. Justice Collins Rice ruled that the Medical Practitioners Tribunal did not put its finger on precisely what was and what was not wrong with Mr. Bramhall's conduct and sanctioned accordingly. The tribunal must now reconsider the case in a fresh hearing.
How many patients did you do this to, Mr. Bramhall?
Described as one of the best liver surgeons of his generation, today Simon Bramhall left court with a career forever scarred.
Number 3. Jack Kevorkian. Dying is not a crime. Those were the famous words of Jack Kevorkian, an American pathologist and euthanasia proponent who advocated for terminally ill patients' right to die by physician-assisted suicide. Born on May 26, 1928 in Pontiac, Michigan, Murad Jacob Jack Kevorkian was a child prodigy who taught himself multiple languages. He graduated from Pontiac Central High School with honors in 1945 and graduated from the University of Michigan Medical School in 1952. During his career, he put forth many controversial ideas related to death. He proposed that a death row prisoner should have the opportunity to consent to undergo medical experiments as a form of execution. He also proposed that prisons harvest organs from executed prisoners and use them for sick patients, but prison officials didn't agree. When Kevorkian was a pathologist at Pontiac General Hospital, he experimented by taking blood from corpses that were recently brought into the hospital and transferred them into the living. He approached the U.S. military with his experiment, as he thought that they could use it to help wounded soldiers in war, but they didn't take him up on it. In 1987, Kevorkian started advertising for his death consulting services in Detroit newspapers, stating, "Doctor consultant for the terminally ill who wish to die with dignity." His goal was to give those who were terminally ill the opportunity to end their own lives, which was not a readily available or legal option at the time. Kevorkian would attach his patients to one of his machines, the Thanatron, which means death machine. It would release a cocktail of drugs or chemicals into the patient through an IV. When he lost his license to practice medicine, he lost access to the controlled substance he used. So he created the Mercitron, aka Mercy Machine, which was a gas mask connected to a canister of carbon monoxide. In both cases, the patient themselves would release the drug cocktail or gas to end their own life. In 1990, his first public-assisted suicide took place in Michigan. His patient was a 54-year-old woman named Janet Adkins, who had recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
The woman, Janet Adkins of Portland, Oregon, was diagnosed as having Alzheimer's disease and wanted to end her life. Her husband spoke of that decision.
Her decision that had been made some time ago, the boys were all familiar with it, and we all knew what she wanted to do.
Mrs. Adkins traveled to Michigan, where Dr. Jack Kevorkian, a retired pathologist, connected her to his invention, a device that first releases a drug causing unconsciousness and then a lethal dose of potassium chloride.
And this stops the heart as soon as it reaches it. So he has a heart attack in deep coma, which is like dying in your sleep.
Kevorkian was initially charged with Janet's murder, but the charges were dropped soon after, as Michigan didn't have any laws in place at the time related to assisted suicide. Instead, Michigan State Board of Medicine revoked his medical license. One of Kevorkian's most controversial cases involved a 70-year-old man named Hugh Gale. In 1993, he helped Hugh complete an assisted suicide with his Mercitron machine, after which documents were found in the garage that noted Hugh requested the gas mask be removed twice, and that Kevorkian only removed it once. The second time, the mask was not removed, and Hugh became unconscious before dying. Michigan legislator then passed a bill making it a felony to knowingly provide anyone with the means to complete suicide, to physically assist them in the act. They did not charge Kevorkian with Hugh's death due to the lack of corroboration from witnesses present at the time. In November and December of 1993, Kevorkian was jailed twice for violating the state's law against assisted suicide, and between 1994 and 1997, he was tried 4 times for his roles in assisted suicides, but was acquitted 3 times, with the 4th resulting in a mistrial. The trials only helped him gain public support for his cause, and the media dubbed him Dr. Death. But he was often criticized by his fellow practitioners, as they believed he was going against their Hippocratic oath to do no harm. According to his lawyer, Kevorkian assisted 130 patients in physician-assisted death. Though Kevorkian's goal was to relieve the pain of terminally ill patients, it was later determined that 60% of his clients were not terminally ill, and 13 had not complained of being in pain. At least 3 autopsies showed his patients had no terminal illness or signs of disease. It is suspected that many of his patients suffered from hypochondria or depression. 5 had no diseases, over a third were in pain, and though many had worsening symptoms, they were not terminally ill. There were also criticisms around how quickly his patients died, as at least 19 patients died just 24 hours after meeting him. Many never had a psychiatric evaluation completed before the assisted suicide, although he himself stated the importance of psychiatric consultations. He also failed to refer 17 patients to specialists after they complained about chronic pain, and he often didn't receive complete medical records from his patients. Kevorkian later stated that he believed patients seeking assisted suicide shouldn't have to be terminally ill to end their suffering. In November of 1998, he allowed CBS 60 Minutes to air a videotape he made in September. The video showed the voluntary euthanasia of his patient, Thomas Yoke, who had Lou Gehrig's disease, also known as ALS. In the videotape, Thomas gives Kevorkian his consent, and Kevorkian gives him a lethal injection. This differed from his previous treatments, where the patient administered the lethal dosage themselves. Kevorkian later said that he shared the video because he hoped to take the case to the Supreme Court, which didn't happen. Instead, he was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and delivery of a controlled substance. Kevorkian dismissed his attorneys and represented himself in his trial. In March of 1999, he was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison in Coldwater, Michigan. While in prison, he was repeatedly denied parole. In May of 2006, he was reportedly terminally ill with hepatitis C, which he contracted in the 1960s while researching blood transfusions. Doctors didn't expect him to live another year. On June 1, 2007, he was released on parole for good behavior, under the condition that he didn't offer advice on, be present at, or participate in any assisted suicides. He was also banned from promoting and talking about them. After his release from prison, he went on to give many lectures on euthanasia, politics, and more. In 2010, a movie based on his life called You Don't Know Jack was released, where Al Pacino plays Kevorkian. Outside of his doctoral work, Kevorkian was also a jazz musician and composer. He released a limited CD release called The Kevorkian Suite, A Very Still Life, which featured him playing the organ and flute alongside a quintet. It received praise from the Entertainment Weekly and JazzReview.com. He was also an oil painter who focused on surreal and grotesque themes rife with symbolism. One piece, titled For He Is Risen, was used as cover art for the 1996 Acid Bath album. In a 2010 interview, Kevorkian was asked about his first patient, Janet Adkins, and what it was like to end her life. He said, "I didn't do it to end the life, I did it to end the suffering the patient's going through. What's a doctor supposed to do? Turn his back?" Kevorkian dealt with kidney issues for most of his life and was eventually diagnosed with liver cancer, which his close friends said may have been from hepatitis C. In May of 2011, he was hospitalized, and on June 3, 2011, he died from thrombosis. His tombstone reads, "He sacrificed himself for everyone's rights." Well, that is going to be it for this video. As always, please give this video a like if you like the content and subscribe for more if you haven't already. If you've done all that and want to support me and the channel, we have channel membership as well as Patreon, as well as merch in the description box, as well as links to all my socials. But until then, I will see you all in the next one.